That's wonderful. You made the agreement with me. You didn't make it with her. That's a covenant. And essentially what God's doing is he's saying, this relationship, Hosea, it's a covenant. It's not a contract. You are stuck with this woman regardless of what she does. Verse number 3. So he went and took Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him a son. All right, so more evidence that this is really happening. We have a woman, a whore, who is named, and her name is
Gomer.
Another significant thing, I don't know if you guys know, some people, some of my brown people back row, medium brown. Not all the way, medium brown. The significance of, why is it so important? Or what's the significance when we hear the son of or daughter of someone? What's that? Absolutely. That is the official. In our culture, I'm Palestinian, so that's why I can make jokes like that. And Denise is half Korean, so Asians are on, they're on for me too. My sister-in-law is Mexican, you're on, and I know some white people. So I always have to preface that, because sometimes I'll make a joke about like an Asian person, and the other person will be like, and I'm like, my wife is Korean. And then they'll meet her afterwards, and she's like, did you lie about, one, you're racist, and then second, you lied. I'm like, no, she is really Korean. I can't help the fact that she only looks half Korean. So in my culture, I'm in trouble, man. In my culture, like I was saying, I'm Palestinian. I am identified by my son. So for example, if we spoke Arabic here and we were in an Arabic community or culture, my name would not be Q. But everyone would call me Abu Adib, which means the father of Adib. Huge burden placed in my son. Huge responsibility. Because he represents me. So when he goes out and acts like a fool, what are they calling him? Or what are they calling me? Well, there's the father of that knucklehead. Yes!
Abu Adib.
That's it, son. That's what they call me. Okay. So, what names do is they, yes, oh, there's a question back here.
Yeah, so would you say Gomer's mother would take the blame for her?
No, absolutely not. The father, unfortunately, what happens here is the reason, and that's actually a good question, especially in light of culture, but what happens is you are identified by your father, regardless if you are a male or female, until you are married, and then obviously if you're a woman, you now are part of that man's family, and you're no longer identified by your father. So, thankfully for Diblaim, once he got married, he was like, that whore is not anything to do with me. That's his whore, not mine anymore. So yeah, I told you I'm going to throw that in there often. So when we see like names, one of the reasons why, when you say he was the father of this person, or genealogy is so critical and important, is because they're naming people that people knew in that day. So it would literally be the equivalent of me going, Adao, whose father is Q. Well, now you guys know, especially, is if you want to go verify something, you have Adao and you have Q, you can go verify a story. It's a real story that takes place. They name people by name, identify them, so if anyone has a question, someone's reading Hosea, like just say 6 months after he writes it and goes, holy crap, is this really true? I'm going to go talk to that whore Gomer. Or, I'm going to go talk to Diblaim, because he's got a whore daughter. Do you see what I'm saying? It identifies the person, and now you can actually make it, you can confront that person, or the story can be verified or found out true. It's kind of like the informant for a journalist. It's like, you don't want to ever give up your source. The nice thing about scripture is they always give up the source. These people saw it, these people lived it, they were around that filthy Gomer. So God tells Hosea, find her, marry her, and then have children. So I'm picturing Hosea getting this message like going, all right, find this woman, all right. There's punch one in the stomach. Then he's like, oh, and have a kid, and then marry her. All right. Now go have some kids. Like, imagine being in Hosea's place. Like, when does this end? God, I thought I was your prophet. I thought I was giving the message to the people. That's what prophets typically did, right? They were usually the example of the message. So Hosea's in for a very interesting ride. So, verse 4, and the Lord said to him, call his name Jezreel, for in just a little while I will punish the house of Jehu for the blood of Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of the house of Israel. And on that day I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel. Now, we read something like this, and if we're not well versed in Jewish history, what happened at that time, this means nothing. And this is where the challenge comes to you guys. You guys come across a passage like this, in our day and age with the internet, libraries, I mean, some people have access to full university, like Northwestern, for example. Big time universities, they have access to their libraries. They're free to go and look this stuff up and kind of go, what does this mean? Most of you guys are lazy and you're going to be like, hopefully a pastor will explain it on Sunday, so I don't have to bother with it. So, I know you guys are lazy. Not you. I mean, I know you were. When I say you, I'm not always talking about you, because why in Greek? Tell me what's the difference between the two yous. One is plural and one is singular. And you can't tell the difference in English, which one is which. So when I say you, I could be talking about Brett, or I could be talking about you all. You just never know.
Oh. I thought you meant like the U is
the letter
is
U.
a moo, not an English. All right.
So, God goes, take this wife. Then he adds insult to injury, right? And he says, have a son, or have a child. And I'm going to name him for you. Now, in Middle Eastern culture, and even more so in Scripture, because so much of it is part of that whole area, the geography of the Middle East, names are significant. You don't ever come across a name and you're like, well, that was random. I don't know what the point of that was. And in the account of Abraham and Sarah, everyone familiar with that back in Genesis? Sarah has a son, and what is he named?
Isaac.
What does Isaac mean? And laughter, because when God told Sarah, you are going to have a son, her response was to laugh. So, God, in his just ultimate great sarcasm, tells her, you're going to name your son Laughter. So every time you call his name, you remember that you laughed at me when I told you you were going to have a son. Isn't that great? Did you pick that Isaac? Right? And then another significant name. I only picked a couple, otherwise we could have gone through just mountains of names. What's Emmanuel mean? Lord with us.
God is with us.
Anyone know someone significant named Emmanuel? Yeah, that's Jesus' name that he said, you will be called Emmanuel, which means God with us, right? Names are extremely significant in Scripture. When you come across a name, again, investigate it. Look in, what does this mean? Now, I'm not asking you guys to sit there literally and become like full-time scholars. I mean, it's not like Scripture is important or anything. I mean, it's not like eternal, so why would you invest so much time into it? That is sarcasm. Did you hear that? So, he says, name the boy Jezreel. It only occurs one other time, so it's a very rare name. And the people who are reading this story are very, very, very familiar with the significance of what Jezreel is. It is a town and a valley that's located between Galilee and Samaria. And this town of Jezreel was in the valley and just northwest of a very significant mountain where worship took place. But what's the most significant thing is when Jezreel is typically named or something happens at Jezreel, there is ridiculous, absurd amount of bloodshed. It's like, battle in Jezreel, you know, thousands of people died, and not just died. I'm talking about were slaughtered, blood filled the valley. I mean, I'm talking about just a horrible scene. Think of Hosea. It's like, okay, marry the prostitute, have a son, and I got to name him the scene of like the most violent episodes of war in the... he's going to call his son his name every so often. I mean, even a horrible dad is going to call his son, it might be jerk Jezreel or Jezreel, you're a jerk, but there's going to be some acknowledgement. He's got to call him his name that, and it's essentially, it's a reminder of you, valley of bloodshed. Now, what's interesting is the actual word Jezreel has a meaning. And it's not, bloodshed or anything. But the word means God may sow. So, on one hand you have name your son Jezreel, which is the site of all these horrible bloody battles. And his name is God may sow. Part of what was going on in this time was there was a lot of cult worship. And who's the primary, you could say, cult leader, false god at this time? It's been going on since the beginning. Baal, yeah. And Baal is traditionally associated with fertility. So anything that's agriculturally being, a need for agriculture, people would make offerings to Baal because they wanted the ground to be fertile. If you were having trouble having a child, you would make an offering to Baal because you wanted your wife to be fertile. I like how it's always the wife's fault. Or it would be the man or the woman, whichever, but they never acknowledged that it could have possibly been the man. They always said it was the woman's fault. So there's this aspect of what the real source of life is in this struggle. On one hand you have Baal, who's this fertility god, and on the other hand, God's telling them, no, you're going to name this kid Jezreel, which means God may sow. I'm the one who does the sowing, not any of these people that you guys have thought of in the past. So, I think that in that passage, let me just go back to it, it says, and on that day I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel, right? I'm sorry, go back to verse 4. Call his name Jezreel, for in just a little while I punish the house of Jeru for the blood of Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of the house of Israel. I found probably a better translation of that, and it's pretty much just, and I will bring the bloodshed of Jezreel upon the house of Jeru. Now, Jeru was a dynasty, a kingly dynasty at the time, and this is an important thing for you guys to kind of understand. You had, like I was saying, Jezreel is the scene of a bunch of these bloody battles, right? But one of the most significant things that happened in Jezreel, does anyone know the story about Ahab and Jezebel? Yes? Familiar with it? Ahab was a ruler, Jezebel was his wife, and they had a neighbor who owned this small, modest vineyard. Well, Jezebel decided, I want this vineyard. It will be mine. And she asked the king to get it for him. Naboth was like, no, I don't want to sell it. Again, identity also in Middle Eastern culture, even till today, is tied into land ownership. If you own land, for example, you know that if you are Palestinian and by some chance you own land in the West Bank, it is punishable life imprisonment if you sell that land to an Israeli person. You're in jail for life if you sell this land to someone who's Israeli. Now think about it. We're talking about per capita one of the poorest areas in the world. If no one knows, and I'm not trying to promote this like pro-Palestinian thing, but the Palestinians are so oppressed. Imagine an Israeli coming to him and going, I'll give you $100,000 for this little tiny piece of land, and if they sell it, it's life imprisonment. Land ownership is significantly tied into identity. So Naboth is like, I own this tiny piece of land, you're the king. Why do you want this one? And no, you can't have it. So what does Jezebel do? He essentially convinces her husband, or she has this feast for him. He comes like he's going to be the honored guest, and then she makes these false accusations on him. So he's punished and he's killed. And guess who gets the stupid land? Yeah, she does anyways. So she just manipulated. So if anyone ever calls you a Jezebel, not a compliment, just so you know. Ladies, specifically. If anyone says you Jezebel, it's like you Gomer. So as if stuff like that wasn't enough, Jezebel did some other things. She convinced, let's see, in 2